Good afternoon, my name's Peter Cripps, and I'm part of the Amplify team here today. Welcome to Amplify. We're on the first day in here in Sydney. We kicked off in Melbourne on Thursday last week. We're very pleased to have you all here. I've got a few housekeeping notes before I start off this panel session. If you're following along on social media, and we certainly would like you to do so, please use the hashtag #Amplify2017. We also have Wi-Fi here available for your use, and access on that Wi-Fi will give you free access to afr.com for the duration of this week. But first of all, to set us up with this extraordinary panel of guests, we have Dr. Catriona Wallace, CEO and founder of Flamingo AI. Flamingo provides cognitive virtual assistants for financial services firms, and Catriona has a PhD in human technology interaction and is one of Australia's most well-known entrepreneurs. Please welcome her to the stage. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We've got an absolute rock star talent on this panel today, including a couple of Americans, so Noah and Mike from the US, from New York. And then we have Sara, who is formerly from Pandora, and Scott from Google. So it's very rare that we get so many people with such experience in a group to talk about AI, the coming of the bots, platforms, and how this is going to affect customer experience. So let me please invite each of the panel members up, and once they're all sitting, I will ask them to introduce themselves briefly about what it is that they do at their various organisations. And then we're going to dive into a deep discussion around what is AI, what does it mean that the machines are here, how do platforms and AI play together, what are some business purposes or problems that these things might solve, and how is it ultimately going to affect customer experience and your business. So we're going to try and make it as interactive as possible. So there are times we're going to get the panel to speak, times I'm going to get you guys to probably speak to each other and then ask the panel questions. So let's get underway, and can you please help me welcome superstar of the field, Noah from Slack. Followed by Mike from MIT, Sara, formerly from Pandora, and Scott from Google. So let me just get an idea from the audience. So those of you, many of you have heard about AI, machine learning, virtual assistants, cognitive automation, robotics program automation. Who is kind of clear on what all those things mean? Who would think it's really interesting if the panel unpacked a bit of that and actually talked about what AI actually is? Who's interested in that? Yeah, I'm totally interested in that too. Okay, so we're going to start, and I'm going to ask for some more technical definitions of what AI, what artificial intelligence is, and then nested in that, we're sort of keen to know what is machine learning and what is a bot. So let's start with Noah. Can you talk to us, well actually first, sorry, do your introductions, and then we'll come and talk about what is AI.
Sure. So by means of quick introduction, I'm here from New York City, where we have much worse coffee than Sydney and Melbourne, it turns out. I lead up Slack's search learning intelligence team, which is basically kind of tasked with the challenge of how do you take cutting edge techniques in machine learning and apply them to the context of work to make people's working lives simpler, more pleasant, more productive, as they have more and more history using Slack. We'll talk more about what that is later, but that's a quick intro.
Thank you. Mike.
Michael Schrage with MIT Sloan School. My background is computer science and economics. I do a lot of work researching the design of network effects, and I'm very interested in the applications of machine learning and AI in generating network effects and affecting user experience.
Fabulous, thanks. Sara.
So Sara Clemens, most recently Chief Operating Officer at Pandora. Despite my strong Kiwi accent, I am also based up in the United States. And prior to Pandora was on the executive team at LinkedIn and Xbox. My interest in this space comes from primarily recommender systems. So how do you give people what it is that they want when they want it, and was one of the founding team of the HoloLens at Microsoft, which looks at a whole range of different systems and brings them together into a service which will really redefine consumer platforms.
Fabulous. Thanks, Sarah. And Scott.
My name is Scott Thomson from Google. I'm not Kate from PwC, but I do acknowledge Kate for letting me sit in. Thank you very much, Kate. So I work in data analytics at Google. Here in Australia, I'm based in Melbourne. I'm one of the lucky few Melbourneites in the Google family in Melbourne. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you. Excellent. So Noah, let's go to you. What is artificial intelligence?
Yeah, so it's many things to many people, I would say. If you read the press in the US, it's pretty much going to be the solve to all business and consumer problems in the near future. I think we had a healthy kind of debate before the panel even started of how to exactly define it. I think kind of most concretely thinking about it as how do you take data incoming and be able to predict things that might happen in the future? And how do you do that in a way that kind of learns over time and gets better at making those predictions? There's many different applications we'll kind of talk about today, but I think at its core, that's, I think, an easy way to think about it.
Okay. Mike, do you agree with that?
Sure. AI is, first and foremost, AI is not machine learning. AI is an algorithm that it lets you recognize patterns, follow rules based on those patterns recognized, if those patterns are chess or photographs, and make judgments and decisions based on that. Machine learning is patterns and decision and data that actually learn. AI follows an algorithm. Machine learning, you train, like a dog, not a cat, or a pet, or a dolphin. So if you can train it, it's machine learning. If it can give you better prediction based on more data, it's AI, and the extreme form of AI would be neural nets, which I'm sure we'll be discussing.
So Scott, why don't we jump to you? Any difference in what Noah and Mike have said? AI, machine learning, two different things?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you could go sort of one further and talk about sentience beyond that. But yeah, I'd say machine learning, AI machine learning, and then cognizant machines.
And what does that mean?
I think we're a hell of a long way away from that last one.
Yeah. Okay, but can you just say what that means?
So in AI, you have supervised and unsupervised learning, and if you set up a machine with a data set and give it some general leading advice and let it go, it would be varying degrees of supervised learning. If you had an AI that sat there, got bored, found a bit of data and started learning all by itself, that would be the extreme of unsupervised learning. Right. If you could actually ask the machine why it did that and it gave you a reasonable answer, you would probably have a sentient AI. So
that's the big problem right now.
Yeah.
You can ask, but they won't tell.
Yeah, that's true.
And now Sarah, and it's not that I'm just asking the only woman on the panel what is the practical application of this, but maybe I am. Sarah, so what does this mean for business? When you are working at Pandora, which does use all of these things, what is AI to you?
Yeah, so I think you can start with the sort of technology, or you can go to the customer. It becomes a very chicken or egg. Do you have a solution that you're looking for a problem to solve, or do you have a problem and you're looking for a solution? And so, at Pandora, we were very much approaching it from the perspective of we have a problem, which is we know people love music, but they can't necessarily find the music that they want to listen to. And so, the description of the founder of what he was seeking to do was to solve for the 90% of the population who, would walk into a record store or today open up, Spotify or Apple Music or Pandora and be like, crap, I have no idea what I want to listen to. Where's the staff picks? I'm just going to go to the 10 albums that they recommend. And so the way that they went about solving that was by using a range of the things that the panel have just described. And so we started with a set of structured data. So every single song on Pandora gets listened to by a musicologist, listed with 450 different facets, and then put into a library. And so when you tell us one song that you like, it would go and find other songs that listened like that. But then we've been applying on top of it for over a decade now, collaborative filtering, collective intelligence, and build a whole range of algorithms which have now learned how to understand what it is that you want to listen to and can effectively use the data that you give us. And there's over 1 billion data points a day that are provided by the listening audience on Pandora in order to play you music that you want to listen to. So, you know, it's really, how do you apply the technology to solve the solution?
Do you consider recommender systems AI?
So we were having this debate earlier, so that was a seeded question if no one else spotted that.
But you didn't answer it. I don't know.
I just felt like I should point out it was seeded. So, you know, we were having a debate earlier. I love the fact that AI has become this term which is almost, you know, if you've got 3 technologists on the panel, they could have a debate all day and not a single person in the room would, you know, be interested in the nuance of a lot of it. But the definition of AI over time has shifted. So, you know, if you look at a kind of on-paper definition of what it is, it's effectively something that can do better than what a human would do. Well, a calculator can calculate the answer to an equation more quickly than a human. Does that mean that it's artificial intelligence? No, because it's not sentient intelligence. You know, it's the ex machina end of it. You know, I believe that in the middle, you know, recommender systems do demonstrate AI capabilities. And certainly the recommender systems that we use at Pandora do.
Okay, so we're hearing a lot about bots and the rise of bots, be they chatbots or other types of robotics in business. Noah, your company is famous for having bots and helpful bots in helping internal teams collaborate.
Yep.
What is a bot?
So for those not as familiar with Slack, what that means is that Slack is a kind of collaboration tool for teams where you can kind of collaborate as easily with your colleagues as you can with machines who are kind of represented in that context as a bot. Depending on the platform, this is a little bit what we were talking about earlier, at its most basic level, it's a kind of conversational interface to interacting with a kind of machine service. A lot of services now have realized, though, that the kind of limits of what natural language understanding can do mean that machines aren't always so great at kind of getting the point of what you're trying to communicate. If you ever tried to use Siri for more than setting an alarm, you've probably felt that frustration yourself. I wouldn't recommend it. But one of the things, and I guess that's the harbor. Yeah, Siri would certainly have been thrown off by that. So when we think about bots, we think about what does that interface look like? It's a mix, I think, a hybrid of a text interface, which is how you talk to other people, but also a bit of what are other kind of elements in the UI that you can provide as a platform, things like drop-downs and buttons and lists and maps in the case of Google's Assistant that allow you as a human to be able to look at the output in a way that's really native and intuitive, different from just text that you might talk to with a person. So I think we're seeing kind of this proliferation as you see this broader shift from kind of email and other types of communication to messaging overall that people are getting so used to communicating with each other through a messaging-like interface or rich messaging interface that they're also starting to get used to talking to machines in the same way. And that's playing out in both tools for work, like Slack, and also tools for consumers, like obviously Google's Assistant and Facebook Messenger.
And so, Mike, you have been in around this field for a few years. How many?
Good Lord. Enough.
Okay.
It's indelicate
in
to
those
ask.
enough years, why now? So why really 2017? And if you look at what the analysts are saying, 2017 is the year of bot strategy, with 2018 being when we really see things start to kick up. We've been in this field, my PhD was finished 10 years ago, and then nothing really happened, and then nothing really happened. And really in the last 12 months, it's all exploded. Why now?
Well, gee, had I been able to answer a question like that, I would have invested in Amazon and Google more effectively. I do think that there are structural reasons why now is the case. I would argue that the most important one, and some of these are illustrated by firms like Slack, is the fundamental architecture for networking and computing has changed. We have APIs, application programming interfaces. Instead of integrated systems, we have interoperable systems. It's becoming easier to run software over different and disparate data sets. And the cost of computation, as you heard from the opening speaker this morning, has just plummeted to near zero. And people now look at the economy worldwide. Economic growth is slow. It's not where is economic growth going to come from? Well, we can keep cutting costs, but what new things, what kind of new value, what sort of innovation is going to push? What is the cheapest way to generate new value from all the data crap that we're collecting? Artificial intelligence and machine learning and the way that they're networked. I believe that that's the fundamental structural shift that's occurring. People are looking for growth. They're looking for cost-effective ways of creating novelty that has value. And machine learning and AI algorithms, be they convolutional neural nets or support vector machines running off of all manner of platforms, is a pretty damn good bet. And I will conclude the way I began by saying, if you bet on firms like, say, Amazon and Google or Slack or Facebook, which you'll notice are leaders in this area, you would not have lost money.
Right. Fair call, I think. So let's now just quickly ask the audience. So we know that AI is being commoditized. Scott, do you want to just talk a little bit about what Google is doing with putting things out, open sourcing or putting things out to developers?
Yeah, so we've open sourced all our AI code as TensorFlow at tensorflow.org, and you can go grab that and run it on your own machinery if you wish. And by doing that, we now have 4,000 active contributors to that code base, which puts it at one of the most popular.
Who are just random developers?
Yeah, but it's putting it in the hands of makers.
Yeah. It was one of the most. It was a revolution in machine learning, because it's not just the code. There's a platform to run the code on.
Yeah.
It's cheap.
Yeah, that's right, and it's that which is also adding to the timing. The platform's there, the hardware's there, it's cheap, it's scalable. And at the same time, all of this is coming into the public domain to be used. We're reaching a breaking point. So we're reaching a point where there is so much data, and the manual processes around it are just hampering the business's ability to grow. And so you see things like in Europe, them just saying, look, I don't want you to prove that I don't want you to send us a report, a 230,000-page report saying that you're compliant. Just give us the API with the data and we'll work out if you're compliant or not. And so that opening up of the data that way lends itself to analysis by a machine.
Yes.
And so you've got the two things happening at once. The machines are becoming cheaper and more easily more open, and also the systems are becoming more open, and the volume of data is just not manageable in a manual process. So it's just this triple threat coming together at exactly the right time.
Great.
Yes, Pandora would not have grown well if it had just hired thousands and thousands of musicologists to index things, although a lot of conservatories would have been grateful.
So
A lot
on
of
that
music students
topic,
would have been grateful.
that's a great segue back to the audience. So if we think now that artificial intelligence is here, the bots are on the rise, machines are coming to possibly replace people's jobs, what's the future look like? So what I'd love you to do, please, just the audience members, if you'd find the person next to you, just 1 minute on talking about where you sit on the, I used the expression bot love last week, but it was not interpreted exactly as I meant. Your excitement about the coming of the machines. So if we look at what the analysts predict, analysts like Gartner, they're saying within the next 10 years, 40% of jobs in these industries will be automated or conducted by virtual machines. So first cab off the rank is retail, hospitality, tourism, then insurance, then banking, then telco, utilities, and then finally, unfortunately, government right at the end. Gartner predicts that 30% of all customer interactions will be conducted by a virtual assistant within the next 5 years. And within the next 2 years, 40% of all major corporations across the globe will be using virtual assistants to service or to sell to their customers. So, audience, please, person next to you, one of these three categories you might sit in. Either you're not sure really if you think this is a great thing that's happening, need some more information, or you are really excited about the coming of the bots and machines, or you are not so excited. You're a little bit worried. What's going to happen to the jobs? Could this all go bad? Do the machines take over? What happens if it all goes bad? So have a quick think about where you sit. Are you I'm a bit worried about the coming of the machines, or I'm kind of sitting on the fence, so I'd like some more information, or I'm super excited, can't wait, bring on the machines. So let's go 1 minute, have a quick chat, and then we'll see how this audience polls. Okay, let's all come back together and let's see where this audience sits. Okay, let's get an idea. How many of you sort of sitting on the fence, not too sure, might need a bit more information, not sure if you're terrified or excited, as my team say, terror-sighted. Who's sitting on the fence needs a little bit more information, not sure whether it's a good or a bad thing, the coming of the machines? Okay, good. Okay, there's a few. Good, thank you. Who is a bit worried? Who's not sure, doesn't think it's necessarily a great thing for humanity or for business that the rise of the machines is upon us? You notice I use Terminator type language. That bots could help us do work. Who's not so happy about this? Honestly. Thank you. Got a couple in the room. And who gets super excited? They want to embrace this world. Machines are coming. It's a fabulous thing. Excited about what we're talking about today and where the future is with machines helping us. Who's excited about it? Okay, cool. Yeah, and it typically is about 3/4 of the audience tend to be pretty excited, and about 1/4 saying either I'm not or I am a bit unsure. So I'm just going to quickly get who is excited. Put your hand up again, and I'm going to just ask someone to volunteer why. Can you say?
Hands.
If you could stand up and let us know who you are.
So my broad view is that as technology improves, we'll be more productive. So in aggregate, there'll be more productivity, which either means more products or services, or if that was to stay at the same level, then would be doing ultimately less work. And then it becomes a question of on what basis would wealth be distributed. So if I, for example, were to lose my job and somebody else is making 10 times as much, because 90% of people have been made redundant, how do we as a society balance out that income? So.
Yes.
But broadly speaking, I'm looking forward to more leisure time.
Okay, thank you. And who needed more information? Okay, up the right over here. Thanks. We'd love to know who you are and where you're from.
Sure. In a more inconvenient spot. Neil Brown, AMP. On the fence, probably at the same point that you're making around I'm not sure that we're actually ready for the dislocation that occurs with this level of change in human society. So I'd like to see some of the protection measures that are in place. And I think government will move much less quickly. And people talk about more jobs, but a different type of job, and point back to things like the Industrial Revolution in the 1700s. But the reality of the Industrial Revolution in the 1700s is an immense amount of dislocation, a whole heap of people that ended up worse off before things ended up coming up to be better. And I'm not sure that we're quite ready for the technocrats, I guess, to put us into a utopia.
You say it like it's a
without some other components. No, I think it's a great thing. I think technocrats is a fantastic thing, and I think there can be a much more even society built out of the whole thing, and the leisure time could be fantastic. But I think some of the social and regulatory components will move a lot less fast than what the technology will be capable of doing, and I think there'll be potential for dislocation.
Great. And then finally, who was really not too happy that this was coming? There's a couple of people down the front. Yeah, okay, great. Why not?
My name is CJ Delling. I'm a comedian and graphic recorder, so I shouldn't really be worried about it personally, but I would like to echo what the previous speaker just said in terms of the government not catching up quickly enough is one of my worries, and also personal experience of having seen people who are not able to participate in the labour market, the crime rates and the social disengagement. I think we're not ready as a society to deal with that right now. If it gets worse, I'm a bit worried about that.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for being so candid. So on the back of that, let's go back to the panel and see what are the actual problems that might be solved by AI, by bots, by machines. Sara, let's start with you. What are some problems that you've seen or you've been working with that you really think it is a good solution?
Yeah. So I think it's worth just reflecting on the comment that the audience has made. So there are real risks with AI. There was a really interesting piece of analysis that was underdone. Google had actually done a piece of work where they'd taken all of the words that had come up through Google News and created a data set called, I think it's Word2Vec, which effectively takes all the words that are in common usage and provided that again to people to use for their own AI. The challenge with that is it embeds all of the gender bias that's represented today through news articles and effectively perpetuates it for everybody who's using that same data set. And so to the point that was raised earlier, AI is only as good as the data on which it is based. And I think there are some real concerns and issues that we need to consider. Notwithstanding that, I also think there's an incredible amount of benefit that can be created from these systems. When we were building the HoloLens and we started looking at, and so for those who don't know, the HoloLens is Microsoft's augmented reality platform. So it provides for you to wear a device, which is effectively like a set of spectacles, and you have digital interaction and physical interaction that comes together. So for those of you who are familiar with Pokemon Go, think of that as an extremely crude version of augmented reality. The sophisticated version would be the three of us who flew here from different parts of the world wouldn't have had to do that. We could all come together in a virtual room and it would feel as if we were all in the same place. When we started building that and we're looking at the array of systems that you had to build, and there's a lot of AI that underpins it. You've got object recognition, motion tracking. It's an incredibly complex system because you're having to constantly and perpetually assess what's going on around you, and then those systems have to intelligently come together and recognise what it is that they're representing. The practical applications of that are extraordinary. So it's being used for training surgeons. So rather than having to actually train on a real person or a cadaver, you can actually have a surgeon put these on and train on a virtual digital body. And so you suddenly start looking at health applications where you're able to train a much greater range of health professionals with a much lower degree of risk. Boeing's using it to do all of their aircraft maintenance training. So rather than having to take planes out of rotation in order to actually train their maintenance staff, they can do that maintenance training on virtual planes. And so there's an enormous range of productive applications which will improve business and society. And I think it's really going to be the balance between those two issues is, on the one hand, what are the risks we can create and how do we create an equal absorption of that benefit.
Although one of the really good things you should be aware of, particularly in the surgical area, laparoscopic surgery, that one of the best indicators for somebody having the capability to be a good laparoscopic surgeon is if they're a good video game player. So that's one of the metrics. So used to be being really, really smart or being able to cut somebody open with a scalpel. If you're not good at video games, you may not be able to go to medical school in the future. That's not a joke, by the way. That's quite serious.
I'd also like to add to that. Machine learning isn't just about replacing jobs. It's not even about replacing jobs. It's about assisting jobs. So there's technologies we use today like driver assist which doesn't replace the driver. There are self-driving cars coming, which will mitigate the use for someone operating manual controls, but it doesn't replace the passenger. There are technologies for a machine learning spoon that matches the tremor of a Parkinson's disease or a motor neuron disease patient so they can feed themselves. There's machine learning that can understand people with speech defects. So this is an enabling technology as well, right? So it is raising the productivity standard of every individual that can use it, and you can build it and train it to match everybody's state. Having said that, I think from both of those speakers' concerns, I think we have a responsibility around education. In order to be able to work with these algorithms and work alongside machines, we need to train people to be good at that. And if we don't invest in training and education in what this is going to mean, then there will be a gap. And we are very heavily invested in STEM education in particular, and in particular with women. And if you look at any of the research around the productivity gains from machine learning and automation, it says these productivity gains will only be achieved if humans continue to work alongside machines. If you just replace people with machines, you will not achieve the GDP targets or the productivity growth. And if we are in a world currently where we have maybe 6% representation of women in STEM, and we don't fix that, we are basically saying it's okay that we only have 6% of women who are productively employable.
Yeah, I think just to echo what everyone said, I think it's about making not just existing things cheaper, but about making things that were impossible possible. And here, all the examples that Sara was giving are all about augmenting people working on very complex tasks. And I think honestly, that's more where the kind of edge of AI is today, is kind of helping people in actually kind of more narrow, specific tasks, not general tasks, be able to do their existing job better so they get rid of the mundane parts and be able to go back to doing the kind of more creative expansion pieces. But yeah, also the education part, I think. Obviously, coming from America, this was quite an issue in the last election. For those of you who didn't read the news every day, I think education and re-education, quite frankly, is going to be something like technological change will move much faster than people's kind of primary education kind of stays current. So that will be another kind of big thing that happens in the next couple decades.
I think it's a responsibility for all of us as corporate citizens to invest in this as well.
And so who's doing it well? Who's doing AI well, machine learning well? Who's got good virtual assistants? We might just put you straight in there, Noah. Who uses Slack? In the audience, who uses Slack? Okay. How do you feel about that, Noah?
I think Australia, from my last 2 weeks, is probably about 18 months behind the US in terms of Slack usage, which is a great opportunity while we have a big office here now. I think, to answer the question, I think on the consumer side, I think obviously Google is doing great work on Maps, Search, its assistant. I think there's a lot of interesting work in the kind of music space. It's kind of very ripe for this type of kind of discovery platform. So Pandora, Spotify. And I think what will be interesting definitely is kind of in the AV space, I think is going to be where there's a lot of kind of interesting kind of developments there. So looking at how some of the players there between, again, kind of Waymo, Uber, and a lot of the car manufacturers, that is kind of the intersection of a bunch of these different trends and kind of sensor recognition and pushing the boundaries there.
Well, for those of you who are not familiar with Slack, so I run a software company, and previously we used to communicate through email and text messaging and WhatsApp and project management sheets. We've got rid of all of that and do our primary collaboration and communication to run the whole software company using Slack. So for us, it's been revolutionary in how our team works together. So I think Slack is an outstanding example of this machine learning collaboration tools, but also meeting the concept of platform. And if we have time, we'll talk about platform as well today. But Mike, who do you see doing it well, whether it's a US-based firm or what you've heard in this region?
I don't know Australia well enough to speak intelligently on that. I think in China, it's clear Tencent and Alibaba take these things very, very seriously. When one looks at who's studying machine learning and AI and operations research, or what the Brits call operational research in grad school. The Chinese and the Indians are overrepresented. Facebook is doing it very, very well. Google is doing it very, very well. Amazon is doing it very, very well, both internally and as a provider of platforms. I mean, I think if you really want to see who's doing it very, very well, you map and track who's using tools like TensorFlow, who is exploring and exploiting sentiment analysis, who is taking the lead in the utilization of open source software. I just, because I can't help myself, I want to be a little more pessimistic than the people here, because I get to go home afterwards. And that is, I think it's a very, very bad time to be average. It's a horrible time to be average.
What do you mean?
What I mean is, if one looks at a Gaussian curve, if one looks at a normal distribution, a bell curve distribution, if you are a C, C+, or B- student or performer in an enterprise, it probably makes more sense for an organization to invest in a smarter machine than a smarter you. The economics of you as an average are becoming worse, not better. I think that's a given. I think one of the real challenges going forward is, how can technology be used to add value to average performers? I'm really not worried about high performers. I'm very worried about second and third quintile performers in organizations. I believe, and I'm not saying this because I'm an optimist, I'm saying this because I'm a pragmatist, I believe that because by definition, there are more average people than there are top 10% people, that there's an enormous market in making average people more valuable and more productive. And I believe that the real innovations coming out of the next 10 or 15 years is not going to be, how do you come up with a machine like AlphaGo that does X, Y, and Z? I think it's going to be, we have this human capital resource, and if we have this software and these sensors, and we can make people who are literally getting 20% more than minimum wage, we can make them 2 or 3 times more valuable to take advantage of these things. And what can we say with a high degree of certainty? That the software is going to adapt. The software is going to learn, because that's machine learning, how to make its users more valuable. Yeah. So if I had to bet, I have no clue how it's going to go, but if I had to bet on the real breakthrough in machine learning over the next 10 to 15 years, it's going to be that. My guess is that it is more likely to come out of China or India, because they got more average people purely as a function of the numbers that they have.
Very interesting.
Australia doesn't have to worry. You only got 20 million people, you know.
No, and I was just going to say, in this room, I think of high performers, we won't have that problem. But speaking of high performing individuals in this room, what I'd love you to do now is just talk to the person next to you, a question that you might have for the panel, or something that you have learned during the last 30 to 40 minutes that the panel has been talking. Just want you to spend a minute sharing that with the person next to you. So something that you might have learned, or a question that you might have that you'd like to pose to the panel, just run it by the person next to you. Obviously, we don't want like really Tier 3 level questions. We're only looking for great, amazing questions. So the person can help you assess without software whether it is a great question.
That helps you with average questions.
Exactly. So let's go 1 minute, something you've learned or thinking about differently, or a question you might have for the panel. Let's just go a quick chat with the person next to you for a minute. Okay, let's come back together again. And let's start out. Let's see if there's a couple of questions that you might have for the panel. So you can direct it at the panel in general, or you can direct it at a particular person in the panel. What questions might you have come up with yourself? Now, the reason for doing that exercise, if that you're super shy and you don't want to mention it, then the person who you were sitting with who thought your question was actually awesome could ask it on your behalf. So who had a question that they would like to ask the panel? Okay, great. We'd love you to stand up and let us know who you are, so we can stare at you.
This is my third question for the day. So
Could you
I'm not
stand
going
up
to
so
stand up.
everyone could see?
Hello. So what is it that machines, bots, artificial intelligence can't replace in the human being? Is there anything?
In society?
Well, what that makes us human? What is it that you couldn't imitate
Okay.
by some kind of
Machine.
artificial intelligence?
Yeah. Great question.
So I'll start from a musical perspective, and I think this is probably true of art generally. We spent a lot of time working out whether or not you could just do the listening that we do with humans with machines. And we do a lot of A/B testing, so we have the musicologists listen to music, we then do machine learning of other music, and we effectively get to do comparative analysis of how effective that is. Our rating, or the metric that we use, is listener hours. So how many times does a song get listened to, how many times does it get completed, how many times does it get thumbed up? So are we playing the right songs to the right people? Machines fail relative to humans. So when we talk about the way that we do musical analysis, we say humans for quality, machines for quantity. And so I still think there is something about music, and I think this is probably true of art generally, that there is a human nuance to that machines, certainly at this stage, are not capable of replicating.
Great, thank you. Any other responses to that?
Yeah, in 10 years there'll be a best-selling song written by and performed by a machine.
There is today.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
You know, the one thing that I want to go back to the average point. You know, at AlphaGo, you heard about Deep Blue, etc. You know, what's left out is that chess machines could outperform, for those of you who know chess rankings, 2000. Chess machines could outperform average players very fast on this. We're moving, to a certain extent, into a superstar economy in that regard. So, you know, when you ask what are the machines that could, I'm going to ask you, why do you want to know the answer to that? Because are you asking that because you are concerned about a career, or because you want to have a certain kind of a relationship with a machine? I mean, it's an interesting intellectual question, but I just don't understand why the answer matters to that. But why?
Or do we become redundant? If a machine can do everything a human can,
Don't.
how do we find meaning in our life?
Because your life has meaning independent of whether a machine is smarter than you. In the same way, your life has meaning. Forgive me. In the same way, I mean, these are questions that the ancient Greeks and the Chinese dealt with. Your life has value independent of how smart machines are. People's lives are valuable independent of the capability of machines. I mean, that's what it means to be human. I don't think we need to. I mean, this is a question. What you're asking is really a religious question, not a business question.
So let me.
We define ourselves through work. If the first question.
You do.
No, most people do. What do you do for a living?
Okay, let me introduce something that might be useful here. So there's a very famous book by Brian Christian called The Most Human Human.
Right.
What AI teaches us about being alive. So he talks and he's a philosopher and a data scientist, and he investigates the Turing test, which was the test since the 1960s, chess machine versus human, try and test out whether the players knew it was a machine or a human they were playing against. So this has been going for 50 years. So he looks at philosophy and he goes back to Aristotle and to Nietzsche and says, if machines can remove some of the mundane things that we do, in fact, they free us to be more human. So let's look what the philosophers talk about being human means. So if you look at Aristotle, Aristotle talks about humans achieving 3 things in their life to be successful. One is to be happy, one is to be successful, and the third is to flourish. Now, if you read Aristotle's work, he talks about the actual real meaning in human life is to be able to flourish or to learn. And then if you look at Nietzsche, also a philosopher, talks about that what is good is when humans understand they have a potential and a capacity and can use that and be on purpose in the world. And if you follow that line and you put Aristotle on the end of it, it's to be an individual who flourishes. So what a lot of us in the AI field have done, we've come up through the humanities, we've run into machine learning, we've started to see what this technology-human interaction is, but we think deeply about these things. We think deeply about ethics and governance and regulations around how the machines can be used and done in a good way, because we know if it turns bad, it'll turn terribly bad. So there's a lot of thinking now, even right out of the White House that Obama set up, where Google is part of it, Apple, Amazon, all of the big players are involved in establishing ethics and guidelines around the use of machines.
Good God, you really want Google and Apple to be defining ethics?
Well,
That's
I don't know.
Good.
Scotty, what do you say about that?
That's why we open source.
So there's a very strong argument, and we'll see the polarization. Those who think the machines will come and take the jobs away and challenge us, to those who believe that we can actually really prosper as humans in society. So again, debate is out. We don't know, guys, right? We just don't know.
There is a natural tension there in terms of the finances and health of a society. You simply cannot replace all the jobs.
Right.
GDP doesn't work that way.
Right.
And anyone in business, who's going to buy your stuff, right? If nobody has a job, right? So these have to be assistive technologies. They cannot be replacing technologies. If you're looking at it as, oh, I'm going to replace all those jobs, you're probably looking at it the wrong way, and you may find you ultimately hurt your market and therefore hurt your business. So think of it as an assistive piece of technology. I think you put it well with the equalising capability of this. People can do far more with machines. I mean, think about trying to do your job today without your mobile phone, right? You're far more efficient because you have a mobile phone. And it's the same sort of mindset. Nobody is looking to replace all the jobs, because then no one will buy all the products.
I think there's also an economic question, but I think there's also a social question posed. There was an interesting article in The Guardian over the weekend about this. It was actually written by a rabbi from Jerusalem, which was talking about AI and what happens in a world where socially, assuming you take care of a universal income, what are people going to do with their time? Is it going to sort of devolve into kind of anarchy? And his observation was, historically what people filled the time that we now fill with our careers was religion. So what's the religion of the future? What is the thing that people are going to do with their free time? What fills that? And what are the environments and the services and the activities that we engage in? And I think that it's an interesting question, but I don't think that we'd necessarily just evolve into anarchy.
Okay, guys, we've got 2 minutes to go, and I want to split this up between the audience and the panel, right? So audience, you can decide. Either I can get the panel to go through and give you, like they've got literally 30 seconds each, their last words of wisdom, the thing that they want you to take away. So we can hear them talk, or maybe we've heard them talk enough today. Or we can get you guys, some of you, to put your hand up or stand up quickly and reflect back to the panel what you've actually learned during this talk. What would you like to? It's up to the audience, not the panel. Who would like, quick hands, who would like the panel to give 30 seconds? Who would like the audience to reflect?
Panel
what? So much for the democratisation. Okay, let's go. Scotty, 30 seconds. What are the audience, the big takeaway for them should be what?
So we've open sourced TensorFlow, and we've also made the Google Assistant available for anyone to build into their products. So this stuff is there to be played with. You should go have a play with it. There's tons of partners like PwC who can assist in this as well. So it's there to be played with and learned from. Whether you choose to use it or not and what you choose to use it for is up to you, but it's there for you to use.
Thank you, Scott. Sara.
I think about the social implications of how you embrace these technologies, and I think that's incumbent on every professional to the sort of 10% quartile commentary that Michael so politely made, and that is this group in this room. And so it's our responsibility to think about how we provide for people's economic and social and spiritual health as these technologies get embraced.
Great, thanks, Sara. Mike, 30 seconds.
My
30
research,
seconds.
my research focuses on these kinds of issues, and I'm going to talk about that tomorrow. My view is very simple, which is these are technologies that should be viewed as a way to A, make yourself more productive and or more valuable. Productivity is an economic concept. Value is a human social concept. The definitions of those things change. The definition of productivity 10 years ago is different than the definition of productivity today. The definition of value 10 years ago is going to be different than the definition of value 10 years hence. These technologies should be seen as a medium to make yourselves more valuable and more productive.
Thank you, Mike. And Noah.
I guess kind of final remark is that I think there's a lot of talk here about purpose and how much purpose and work are kind of intermingled today. I think that will have to change, but I think while that is the case and we spend 40, 50, 60 hours a week at work, I think figuring out how we can make these technologies serve us to be both more productive, but also feel like our working lives are actually simpler and more pleasant, and what we can do to take the tools that are benefiting us in our consumer lives and apply those to the working place, I think is something we would all probably appreciate. So that's what we're focused on at Slack, but I think there's a lot of excitement in the future.
Great. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking the panel, Scott, Sara, Mike, Noah. Thank you.
And thank you, Catriona. We're about to swap over, but some of you who've been here all day will have noticed in the corner we have Daniel, who is a master in improv guy. I can't say the word. He is not a bot. He's not AI. He is playing electric piano. But I've got a challenge for him and his improv skills. We want 3 notes from the audience. So between A and G for those not musical. Sing one. C. Do you want someone put a sharp on that or a flat? No. Straight up. Next note. B flat. And a third one from the panel.
F sharp.
F sharp.
So C, B flat, F sharp.
Ooh.
Oh. That's
Okay.
brutal.
He will play you out. Thanks very much for your attention.